Good morning, everyone. Welcome to a special live stream for Western alums. I'm Mark Healy. I'm the Executive Director of the Ivey Academy, the Learning and Development Wing at Ivey Business School. This session is brought to you by Western Alumni and by Ivey. I just want to talk a little bit about today's session, which we're calling Bringing Yourself Forward, Your Best Self Forward, and how to be a leader in your next virtual meeting. The way we sort of described it is no matter what your new normal looks like, we're all facing disruption at work. At a time when clear communication is more important than ever, we're also navigating new challenges that come from being on camera, remote calls, back-to-back meetings, long hours in the home office. And so with 5 minutes to get ready for your third virtual meeting of the day, how do you reset your thinking and take on a leadership mindset? Today we have Ivey Professor Kanina Blanchard with us to talk through lots of approaches. Kanina has extensive experience working in international business, the public service, nonprofit, consulting. She feels privileged to have lived and worked globally, while she focuses now on teaching, consulting, and her PhD, exploring responsible leadership. Her years of working in issues and crisis management is what led us to asking her to be here with us today, so thank you. Kanina researches and writes on crisis communications extensively. She's also been there and done that, having led this kind of work for lots of large corporates like Dow Chemicals. We'll start today's session by looking at some ways that high-performing executives use paralinguistics, physical presence, neuroscience to lead through influence. We'll also take some live audience questions. We'll do some polling to try to get some practical advice and real-world examples. We hope you come away from today with kind of a quick 5-minute framework you can use to improve your communication skills anywhere, at work or with friends, in your relationships. Also with us today, I'm going to work as a bit of a moderator and a traffic cop, but we have our executive producers, that's Sean Ackland Grant with us. Sean's going to keep track of and curate some questions. He'll come in with themes from everyone listening. So Sean, over to you. Can you talk a bit about how this is going to work and launch our first poll, please?
Sure. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Ivey Academy Live. If you're watching for the first time, welcome, and we've got a great session lined up for today. If you've joined us before, you might notice things are a little bit different today. We're going to be running the Q&A through a platform called Slido. I see that some of you have already joined us. Most of you are probably asking, what is Slido? So either on your phone or in a new browser tab, you can visit slido.com and enter the event code 1255W. We'll be putting that back up on the screen, but it's 1255W. There are no signups and no downloads. Anyone can participate and submit questions. So we'll be watching the Q&A there. The questions with the most upvotes will appear at the top of our question wall, and we'll show that live during the broadcast. We're also going to be starting with a word cloud through Slido that I'll kick off right now. It's going to be interesting and hopefully a bit of fun. So take a second and join now so you're ready to participate when we reference it. But the question is, what makes you nervous or uncomfortable with being on camera during virtual meetings? I know this probably resonates with all of us. So hop on over to slido.com, event code 1255, and give us your thoughts. In the meantime, I will throw it back to you, Mark.
Okay, thanks, Sean. So Kanina, and like you and probably like most of the folks in our audience, I spend a lot of my day going from virtual meeting to virtual meeting. I have almost no time in between meetings to kind of fully prepare, even get my thoughts together. I'm looking forward to the conversation today, even for myself, just to figure out how to take a step back, learn a new framework. Could you set this up for us and just kind of give us an overview of what you want to go through today?
Absolutely. So let's take a step back before we move forward. So many of us worry about things like, how am I going to bring my best self forward in a given situation at work? Maybe it's a crucial conversation. Maybe it's a difficult conversation, something emotional. Maybe you're just simply tired and you're afraid that your body language, your facial expressions, your tone of voice is going to convey the wrong message. I don't know if any of you have had this happen, but someone say to you, for example, "Oh, you look angry. Is something going on?" Or they say, "How come you were smiling? That was such a sad story." These things worry us because we're not conveying to our audience who we want to convey. Now, in a world now that we're 10 hours, 12 hours, 14 hours, tethered to the computer, looking at an aperture in a camera on our computer. We're always on. And so these concerns are not only natural and normal, but in today's reality, they've been magnified. Now, one of the things that we hear a lot about is executive presence. Now, what we know is that there's been some tremendous work that's been done in that area and in that field. And I don't want to take away from that. But what we also know is that people today have a bit of a concern that this idea of executive presence has a sense of being unauthentic, or that people come across like they know how to act and how to speak, but they're not believable. So what some of my colleagues and I at Ivey have been doing is looking at and taking the fantastic work of the Ivey Institute for Leadership, their character and commitment work, and parlaying that with what we teach professionals and leaders in terms of communication. And I want to call out Mary Wheel and Lucas Manzani for their terrific partnership in that. And we're going to be talking about this model very shortly. But I'm going to go through a few slides first. So if you remember nothing from today other than this, is this. When you want to bring your best self forward, it's not about what you want to say. It's not about what you want to convey or what you meant to do. It's all about this. It's all about what your audience hears, what they see, and ultimately how they feel. How they feel. How you leave people feeling determines how successful your communication was. So keep that in mind. The audience matters. They matter very, very much. Now, second, what happens between what we're hoping for and what others hear and see and feel? Well, there's three things. One is emotion. Emotion gets in the way of us bringing our best self forward. The next thing is, have we prepared for our communication? And as Mark said, it's one thing if you've got 3 weeks to put together a major presentation, but day to day, that time for preparation is smaller. And so is your opportunity to practice. But today, some of what we're going to share is help you focus on some key things that are going to help you get to be the best self that you can be in that moment. Now, we are going to be focusing mostly today on leadership communication competencies. At the same time, I mentioned earlier about the work of the Ivey Institute. And let me sort of pull this together for you. So when we talk about leadership competencies when it comes to communications, we start with, in courses, for example, are you strategic and clear? And everything that that involves. There's the fundamental of the written word as well as the spoken word. There's paralinguistics. And we're going to talk about more what that means. But it's everything that comes out of your vocal box except for your words. There's physical presence. And we're pretty comfortable with what that means, but we're going to break that down. Now, I'm not a neuroscientist, and I am not pretending to be. However, neuroscience helps us understand how the human brain works. So what people end up hearing, seeing, and feeling, some of that we can better understand by understanding some of the neuroscience behind it. So we are going to talk about that. But first, I want to show you some of the character work. And that's very quickly. The point of saying this is, if you have time, go to the website, the Ivey Leadership Institute website, and take a look at the dimensions of character. Like your muscles, they can be developed. We don't have time to go through that today, but please know that that underpins a lot of what we're going to be talking about. So how does character and commitment infuse and help our leadership communication? So let's take a look at that. So first and foremost, when it comes to character, it's about who you are. And it's important to do that hard work to understand who you are. Now, most of you have done assessments, pull those out. Perhaps you have assessments of your staff or people you're working with. Take the time to understand yourself, but very much remember it's your audience that matters. So focus on your audience and know your purpose. When you're going into a communication, know what it is that success and failure might look like in that communication. What is your ask? What is the order you're hoping to get? Having these things in your mind can help you in the moment, in a hurry, to bring your best self forward. Then comes context. And how important is context? In today's world, our context is this. It's a camera. It's an aperture in a camera. And so we're going to unpack that today. And at the end of the day, it's about your willingness to learn and adapt. Now, in courses I teach, when we sort of start pulling the string and unraveling that, we talk about things like the art of apology. We talk about understanding other cultures and communicating and leading in other cultures, because that's part of learning and adapting to new ways of being. Today, we're here to talk about this context of the electronic world. Now, next I'm going to put up what is very much a scary slide. Now, as I put this up, I don't want you to panic. I want you to just have a flavor for when we talk about the fundamentals of leadership communication competencies, what are some of the fundamental things that we're looking at? Now, today we're not going to talk about making sure we're strategic and clear, and we're not going to talk about the fundamentals of the written word and the spoken word. But if you look under paralinguistics, the nuances of speech and learning techniques and the importance of timing. When we think about physical presence, we think about demeanor, and we think about kinesics. And under neuroscience, there's some key points there as well. So we're going to touch on some of these things in the hope that we're going to leave you with a little process that as you go from meeting to meeting, that if you can think through these key things, that perhaps you're going to feel that much stronger and more able to bring your best self forward. So with that, let me pitch it back to you, Mark.
Yeah, thanks. I know we talked about this, in the prep. I'm super conscious of all this stuff being on camera a lot, and I'm excited to kind of work our way through this. Sean, do we have an initial set of responses from that poll in word cloud?
We do. Yeah, I'll show that over now. Camera, people.
Okay, it looks like camera, people have come up sort of really high, and then we've got folks worried about their face, their physical appearance, visual, time, lots of different answers here. What's your reaction to what you're seeing here?
Well, I think it's just illustrative of the challenges that are out there. For some people, they're very comfortable in front of the camera, but they're living in a home with perhaps lots of people, and you're working from home and you're worried the dog's going to bark and that somehow is going to be disruptive. For some people, and again, depending on who you are, maybe just the whole idea that there's 10 people in a virtual meeting that literally are staring at the pores on your face, that every expression you make can seem uncomfortable. So what I'd like to start with is, it's okay. It's okay that you're nervous. It's okay that some of these things are discomforting, because it means you care. And as long as professionals that we care, that's key, because as long as we care, we're willing to learn and get better. So we can go through some of the specific questions, and I'd encourage people to continue to add on and think about what it is that you're hearing, what else you'd like to ask. But maybe we'll start to go through some of these questions using the model of thinking about our paralinguistics, thinking about our physical presence, and thinking about just how our brains sometimes work and why that's important to know.
I think that's great. I think that's exactly where we'd like to start. Can you talk a bit more about nuances of speech, paralinguistics. What does that really mean, and how do you think about it in this context?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we're working with executives, we're working with students, we talk about, fundamentally, there's been literature out there for 50 years that talk about people don't really remember what you said, but they remember, how you made them feel. And one key part of that is your use of voice and tone and noise and silence and pauses. And it seems simple to say, but it gets not only complicated, but our bodies sometimes do crazy things. So right now, my voice is drying up, so I'm going to take a sip of water. Why did I do that? One of the things we know that working in this virtual environment is difficult is that our biology changes. We don't swallow normally. Mark, have you had a sip of water at any point recently? Our voices get dry. Our lips get dry. They do that for a reason. We also don't blink at a normal rate. And when all of these things are happening biologically, it affects the tone of our voice. If you're sitting all day, imagine the weight on your body and your vocal cords, and maybe you're slouching. And all of a sudden, as I look down, perhaps you heard a change in my voice. Simply by standing up, if you're making a pitch, something you want people to be excited about, if you're sitting and you haven't been blinking and you haven't been swallowing and you haven't been moving, how are you going to sound like you're excited? And if you're monotone, then why is someone going to buy your idea? So stand up, have a drink, look around, and you're going to find that your voice is going to change when your hands move. Thank you, Mark. I see you're having a sip. Your hands. This gets into the physical presence, but these things are all connected. When you see my hands, if we were doing a course on presentations and communications in person, Mark, we'd be talking to you about the importance of your hands, of being open, of movement to show what's important. If you're sitting and you're talking on the phone, not only does no one see you, all they hear is your voice. And if you're physically not moving, your voice is likely not undulating and giving a sense of what's important, and you're losing people. So that's just one aspect of voice, and some very simple things that you can do to keep yourself sounding like you're interested. Because if you don't sound like you are, then no one else is going, to think that you are either. Silence.
Yeah, that really resonates. I typically pace, and the more I pace, the better the better my thoughts get, and I feel like I'm slightly more inspiring, or at least more engaging with an audience. And so this drives me crazy, actually, not being able to kind of do that in the way that I normally would. Another thing that we've talked about, I know I'm conscious of it, is this idea of scripted versus rehearsed versus prepared. I used to have a rule when I ran my consulting shop. I would tell my consultants all the time, always prepare but never rehearse. You're going to come across as inauthentic if you're rehearsed. And I know that's a thing that you've thought a lot about, and just love your comments there.
Sure. No, absolutely. And I was just about to talk about silence, and I think this also fits in there. We have a natural apprehension of silence. Depending on our personality, some of us dread that silent moment. But when we're presenting, when we're trying to compel people, and we'll see a tie here to neuroscience as well, silence is not only okay, it's really important. And to your point, Mark, when we're rehearsed, when we've prepared too much, I've even had people call me and say, someone told me I sound robotic in an interview. When you've memorized, I'm sorry, but people are not going to feel like you're bringing your best self forward. What you're doing is simply reading. And we know you can read. And if you've rehearsed and memorized everything you're going to say, then you're just repeating. And if you're doing that, you're not showing your audience that you care and that you're interested in them. So this is also where silence comes in. Know what you want to say, have bullet points, jot down what those key messages are that you want, and then remember, if it's important, it's okay to pause, to have a moment of silence, to let people go, that was an interesting point. And then to ask them questions. Keep it conversational, especially when we're using this medium, which has an incredible way of, one, draining our energy, draining and toning down our voice, our body, and depersonalizing us, because we are staring at a hole in sort of a black camera above our computer. So we need to make it real. So focus on your energy, your movement, your voice, your tone, and also use silence.
That's great. I know we want to move ahead and talk a bit about physical presence, but Sean, just before we do, are you seeing anything in terms of Q&A or from the chat that you think we should address right now?
One good question from Kay about virtual meetings where some are joining by phone and others by video, and how to navigate sort of making sure everyone has a chance to do so.
That's a great question, and it's a very important one for a lot of different reasons. So first of all, I think it is important to set out for yourself, your staff, your team, if it's possible, what meetings do have to be on video, because there is such a value of seeing someone's body language. If it's a major decision that needs to be made, there are other meetings that can be by phone. And one of the messages that I have is, don't hesitate to toggle your technology. Toggle your technology. Because sometimes people need a break from staring at the camera. It causes headaches. Again, it affects our blinking. So maybe it's starting off with saying, hey, this is a quick touch base. Let's all stay focused. Let's do it by phone. We're done in 10 minutes. No major decisions need to be made. Now, I think what the audience member is saying is that that might not always be possible. And you do have people maybe because they don't have technology or their video is unstable. Well, remember, as in any kind of communication, different people learn differently and different people appreciate communications in a variety of ways. So there was a fear, right? When radio came out, the print would go away. And when TV came out, the radio was going to go away. Well, now we've got Twitter and TikTok and all these other things. And still we have a phone and still we have the written word. So depending on what it is that you need to accomplish. So if we go back to some of the fundamentals of communication, what is the purpose of the communication? If the purpose of the communication is to get a decision or an order or to get input from people, then ideally do it on video. If people are using different mediums, they're in the car, etc., allow there to be multiple vehicles that you use to get their input. So for example, maybe ask them in advance to type in their feedback or to provide it after. Perhaps it's multimodal, where you're looking for thumbs up for people who are on a video call and allow people to come onto the call to vote yes, or to say something verbally, or to send something electronically. Create a Word document. Maybe that's a way that everyone, whether you're on video or whether you are on phone, everyone can engage using that document on screen. So don't feel limited to any one technology, and literally layer it as you can, depending on how important what you're trying to have happen in that meeting is. I hope that helps.
That's great, Kanina. Thank you. And just a reminder for our audience, we are collecting questions over at slido.com under event code 1255, just in case you missed the introduction.
I know one of the things that I do if I've got folks in on video and by phone and remotely is I'll start with engaging those that are the most remote. So I'll ask the first question to go to the phone so that I don't forget that they're actually there, right? And then the second and the third I'll do with whoever's in the room or live. Let's move in and talk about physical presence, which I know is a big territory here. One of the things that the piece of feedback I've gotten it forever is, hey, Mark, you don't smile enough, which is why that's because I'm grumpy all the time. No, but I feel super self-conscious about it now, and I've given myself like a smile quota, and then I feel goofy when I kind of force it. But I know you've got kind of a strong view, I think, on physical presence and how important it is, and so just advice for me or for others who are thinking about this and how to change your behavior and kind of engage your audience through this medium.
Okay, that's a great question. And I think there's many parts of physical presence. So I'm going to kind of start off giving those couple of different parts, and then maybe we'll unpack each one. So when we think about physical presence, it's most definitely our own physical presence. But there's also physical presence in terms of our choreography, where we are, how we move our bodies, how we interact in the space that we're in. And that is also a key part of physical presence. So maybe we'll sort of break it down into those areas. There's a couple more, but that's probably the two most important for us to be talking about here. So first of all, let's talk about our own selves. So if you are going into the office, you have a sense of your demeanor. Do you walk in with a smile, or do you walk in looking at a piece of paper and aren't accessible to people? Do you nod? You convey who you are. You bring yourself forward with simple things like how you say hello. Now that doesn't change. It doesn't change when we're in the virtual world. If people are coming onto a virtual meeting and you're doing this, so excuse me. Yeah, hi. Yeah, I'll be with you in a second. You automatically convey to people they're not important. Now, you might have to be dealing with something on this phone right now, but you can look up and take a minute and say, I'm so glad you're all joining. Just give me a minute. I need to take care of something really quickly, and I'll be right with you. Take the moment to engage, because of this distance that's created by the technology, those simple things like turning your back or not paying attention can be accentuated to someone who may already feel distant and far away, especially, Mark, as you said, that person on the phone. So some of those really basic social graces that we were taught in kindergarten that, sometimes we have to go back and tap into, it's really important. And along with that is eye contact. So right now, I hope those of you who've joined in feel like I am looking at you. If you do, then it's because I am looking at something that is the size of that tip of my pen, and it's the little hole on my camera. What most of us are doing is looking at the screen. Now, I'm looking at the screen. I can see Mark. You probably see my violin. And people understand that at some level, right? We know, oh, she's not trying to ignore me. She's looking, well, maybe she's looking at herself. So you start to wonder. I've actually been in meetings where people have fixed their hair and other things, but we'll stop there. But it's important that you're mindful. You can't spend 10 hours looking at that hole. But if you don't take the time to acknowledge that people are looking at the top of your head more than they're looking at your eyes, it's going to affect how they feel. And how they feel matters. So use your body, use your eyes, use your voice. Speak to people like they matter. And there's a better chance that they're going to stay engaged. And if they're engaged, things are going to work a lot better than if they start feeling distanced further and further away. Does that help, Mark?
Yeah, that helps a lot. And now I'm conscious that I've been looking at you and not my camera for the last half hour. So I'll practice this right now. I know you like to think about physical space. So I think you use the term choreography. I know you get questions about your violin. I get questions about these silly bins that I've got in my office. How important is the physical space you're in, and trying to either utilize that or hide it when you're on camera like this?
Yeah, it's funny you would mention that. So the first time we did a webinar together, one of the questions from the audience was about the violin and what that meant. And I then, in teaching some students, they laughed, and I don't know, Sean, if you're going to show my whole workspace here or not, but jokingly and not so jokingly, they referred to it as their grandmother's retirement home, which kind of broke my heart, but yeah, it's me. So this is my space. This does depict who I am. I just actually redid my husband's office space, very modern and hip. But nonetheless, it is part of who you are. But sometimes you have to adapt that depending on the situation. So let's talk a little bit about the importance of background. If this was a very personal conversation, if this was a very emotional conversation, if I was needing to lay off someone right now, if I'm standing back and it's a broad room, it adds to the sense of it being impersonal. So depending on the topic, you need to use your space. You need to use light. If you're having a difficult conversation and your room is not well lit, it creates this sort of sullenness, and you have to be mindful that people are interpreting. So oftentimes I'll be speaking to someone and they have what I affectionately call is the family wall of shame behind them. And I have several of those in my home. The problem is, if I have a wall of shame or lots of things behind me, what might happen is people look right past me because they're looking at my wedding picture, or they're looking at a piece of art, or they're looking at my violin. And so I've kept the violin because it's a great excuse to point to it and to talk about it. These are all things that are important. And mood. So I talked about lighting, and you mentioned earlier about smiling, and I didn't take that one on directly, but maybe this is an opportunity to do that. When you know what you want to get across in this discussion that we're having, you want people to feel safe, or you want people to feel inspired. Everything you do, from the expression on your face to how you're sitting to the lighting, all matters. And that's a lot to think about. And I know this can seem overwhelming, but if you simply have it as a checkbox, your back might be hurting, and so you push back. And maybe, Mark, you can demonstrate that. If you push back in your chair and sit further back, whether or not you mean it, you're giving people a sense of you're pulling away from the conversation. So be mindful of your physical presence and how you're using your space, because it's conveying a message. Don't be paranoid about it. If you realize you just did that, you can come back and with a laugh saying, I wasn't pulling away. I heard that on a webinar somewhere. My back's killing me. How about you? You can use humor. We're human beings. We're not artificial intelligence. We can't get it all right, but be mindful, at least know that people are making these interpretations and they matter. And by the way, Mark, what makes you smile? Is it your kids? Your dog? What makes you smile, Mark?
Yeah, my kids for sure.
Your kids. Okay. Have a picture of your kids. And you're tired. And you're starting to zone out. Right? It's 5 o'clock at night. And you got 6 more meetings left. Look down at your kids. For some of you, it might be music. Play music in your head. For some of you, it might be a TV show or a character. Have them there with you. And when you need to bring that forward, I hate the term fake it till you make it, because people know when you're faking it. Look at something that makes you smile and you'll smile. Think about something that makes you smile and you will.
Hey, Sean, how are we doing on audience questions? Anything that you think we should get to here before we move to our last territory?
This one maybe seems a bit self-serving because we submitted it last night as a test, but all of what I'm hearing, it such fantastic tips, but can feel, as you've mentioned, at 5 p.m. a bit performative, right? It can just be a bit tiring. How do you fight that Zoom fatigue?
Absolutely. Well, and I think it is very much about knowing yourself. So let's go back to that framework, right? If you know yourself and I'm a morning person. I am an annoying person at 5 a.m. I've got energy. I think the best. I work the best. And as the day goes on, I get more and more tired. So if you can, and we can't always, but if you can, think about what you need to get done in the day and plan it out the best you can. In between Zoom meetings, get up and stretch. If it doesn't have to be Zoom, give yourself and give your participants, your colleagues, the right to not be on Zoom if they don't have to be. Give their eyes a rest if you can give them a rest. Take the time to stretch. Take the time to drink water. These simple things will actually sustain you. Think about your day, not as a sprint, but as a marathon. And if you're training for a marathon, you stretch, you hydrate, and something that I haven't talked about, and I'm going to try to be knowing that there's people all over on the call, is if you're in the office and you go to a meeting and you're walking past the bathroom, you have an easy reason to spend however long it is to get in and get out. If you're sitting on Zoom meetings, you're also not listening to your body when it comes to hunger and other very natural processes. Listen, because you're going to exhaust your body and your mind if you don't listen to what your body needs and try to create some kind of a regular schedule. Try those things, and hopefully, even a little bit, you'll find yourself less taxed.
Thanks, Kanina. That's great. I like also the idea that leaders can play a role in managing that for their teams and not asking for too many virtual meetings. That's very helpful.
Absolutely.
I think what Sean is saying is I should stop asking for so many virtual meetings. I resemble most of your comments. Well. So there we go. Let's move forward. Let's move into the last territory, Kanina, you wanted to cover. You wanted to talk about neuroscientific basics, or the competency around neuroscience. I can barely spell neuroscience, so maybe if you could just give sort of a primer on that, and why is it important for a leader to know what that is and learn and adapt.
For sure. And I don't know, Sean, if it would be helpful to bring that crazy chart back up for a minute. But I think that what we know and what we learn about the human brain, it can help us recognize why so many of the best practices we talk about in communications and in leadership matter. They matter not just because they're best practices. They matter because we are, for the most part, dealing with human beings. And what we know is that human beings zone out. So we can say, maybe it's 60 seconds or 90 seconds. I come from a journalism background. And what we know is that people's mind time limits are just getting shorter and shorter and shorter. Watch a movie from the 1950s and how long it takes to pan and show you a scene, and how often that scene changes compared to how quickly, now every 3 or 4 seconds, something changes. So if we're dealing with human beings whose minds are working like this, and I'm talking to you and I never physically move, I've lost you. I've lost you most definitely within 3 minutes. So make sure that you're providing some kind of stimulation. So that can be the tone of your voice. It can be moving your hands. It could be, for example, I was wrapping up a class, a virtual class, where all of the MBA students had finished off their presentations, their final presentations. It's a big day. If we were there together, you know what I would see? I would see fist pumps and all these weird handshakes and hugs. Well, it's kind of sad. We're probably not going to get hugs for a while, and we're probably not going to have handshakes or fist pumps the way we did. But I started this crazy ritual where when someone finished, we started clapping and we started demonstrating how we felt, because those actions create stimulus. They create some contrast from what the norm is. The minute people get thinking, I know what's going to happen next, it's like the TV show you watch every day. Okay, I know what's going to happen. You know who the bad guy is before they've divulged it. When that happens, you've tuned out. It's like when you put a PowerPoint presentation up, people start to nod off. So what can you do to create dramatic contrast, to give people frequently something different? So there's things that you can do with your voice and your body. You can throw in a presentation. You can throw in some noise or some verbal or physical recognition to keep people focused. You said something really interesting, Mark, earlier about going to people on the phone first, for example. One nice thing to do is set it up so that people know that you're going to keep things changing. Tell them, guys, I'm not going to go around the circle and you don't know when I'm going to pick you. So be on the ball. Make it fun. Do something to make it fun. And this is because you want people to remember and you want them to feel a certain way. So you have to keep them attentive. So there's some really nice work out there on neuroscience and presentations. Take a look in the chart that I sent you. There's an author by the name of Simon. There's videos out there. These are all small things that can help you help your audience hear, see, and feel the way you want them to.
I want to just do one more in this territory. I know we got a number of questions that came from sort of the audience ahead of time, and I have the same one. I don't find it that hard through this medium to spin up a new project and get people excited and engaged about it. I find it hard to keep the momentum of engagement up if it's not a really short burst project. And just wondering if you thought about that, do you have advice on that?
Well, and I think one of the challenges, and even I was listening to CBC News this morning, and they were talking about some workplaces concerned about productivity. And that sort of is almost a juxtaposition to what I've heard from many of my clients and my students and people I work with, that they're actually now not working 8, 9, 10 hours a day. They feel like they're on all the time. So somewhere between here, I think we need to determine as a leader, what is the level of engagement? What is success? What are those touch points that are important? If you have too many, it sort of feels like Big Brother is watching. If you don't have enough, those people who maybe struggle more with organization might fall away. So again, let's go backward before we come forward. So do you know yourself, how you work? Well, it's important, because if you tend to be like me and you're up at 6, you're up at 5 and you're texting, you're probably going to be putting a lot of pressure on your people, because they're going to feel compelled to be up and work. They probably felt that way when they went into the office. They're going to feel even more. So your own cadence, using technology, touching base, etc., you need to understand that and the effect it has on others. When you're working with people in a team, you probably have a pretty good sense who's a self-starter, who tends to be very analytical or independent, versus perhaps really creative people who do amazing work, but if there isn't some kind of check-in basis, that they'll be off on a tangent. So it doesn't have to be the same touch base with your whole team. you probably adapt already when you're in the office. Now, how can you do it electronically? So it's finding this balance, but knowing that you can have the flexibility, and you need to have the flexibility to touch base and keep things going. Now, there's things that you also have to do for the whole team. And I talked about celebration. Don't forget that one of the most important parts of being a human being is the social, and it's the connection, and it's the water cooler talk. So a really creative opportunity that I saw was a company that sort of put up a water cooler chit chat space. And there's a water cooler work chit chat space, and there's a water cooler personal chit chat space. And you can engage as you wish, but it's really nothing more than, hey, Mark, do you know what we need to be doing with this? I'm falling behind. Can you help me? So creating some virtual opportunities to keep in touch with people.
So if I summarize that, I think I heard you have to be far more deliberate through this medium about almost everything than what comes naturally in a sort of physical environment. And I think I also heard you say I should expand my no texting zone from my current, which is 2 to 5 in the morning. I should probably widen that a little bit, which is fine. I'll consider it. It will be under consideration.
I think you can talk to your staff about that.
Yeah, they've given me feedback. It's fine. So we're up against time as we always are. I can't believe how quickly this has gone, but I want to kind of move to wrap up. So before closing thoughts, I know you've talked about this kind of 5-minute preparation and a bit of a checklist, and I'd love it if you kind of recap that, and if you don't feel like you've got to rush through that, we've got enough time for you to step your way through it. I'd like people to have that as a tool and a takeaway.
For sure. And so I'm going to ask Sean to sort of bring up the next slide, which is really just sort of a recap of some of the things that we've talked about, ideas of how to deal with biology. So if we go to the next, the slide before that, Sean, if some of the contextual challenges that you may all be facing, we've touched on a little bit today, but the biology issue, the fact that this is constant, the fact that this is draining, the reality of emotion, the fact that we're human, the fact that it's impersonal, and how to be purposeful. So what I've tried to do here is just give you some tips from what we've talked about today, and ask you to do this with 2 areas of focus. One is, what can you do for yourself? And 2, what can you do for others? So we've touched on the biology aspect a couple of times, but what are you going to do when you leave this call and go to the next call? What are you going to say to folks? Before we started, I said, Mark, do you have a glass of water? If you demonstrate behaviors, people will learn. You said, Mark, you have to be so deliberate in this world. And it's true, and that can be exhausting. But remember that as human beings, we adapt pretty quickly when we want to. So take a moment and show your staff that you're drinking. Tell your staff, okay, guys, we've been at this for 20 minutes, and my eyes are tired. Let's look to the left. Focus your eyes on what's out your window or on the other side of your house. Bring those into your practice, and like muscle memory, it's not going to be as taxing for you in a week once you've sort of practiced some of these behaviors. And I'd like to reinforce this idea of toggling technology so that you are being very active in recognizing that there are times of day that's better to be on video. People aren't going to maybe be able to bring their best selves forward at the end of the day. They're tired. So why have your most important decision-making meeting at 5 o'clock? Have it at 10, because you know people are fresh. There's sunlight. Consider these aspects. They'll become a part of your way of being. So control what you can and help others control what they can to address the fatigue. So I hope that's helpful. The last slide, maybe this is a checklist. Maybe this is something that you can use to help you. So I'm going to give you a moment and just let you read through a couple of the points that most interest you. So I tried to use silence. When you're presenting, remember, this is a bad slide. I've shown you two very, very bad slides today that you should never use in a presentation. Because if you're in person, the most important way to compel and influence someone is by having them focus on you and you focus on them. If they're focusing on a slide, well, they're not listening. They can't. And that last slide, it's important and I hope it's helpful. And I know that's going to be made available to you. But I wanted to show you, take the minute to let people read the slide. So if we bring it back up, what I've tried to do is show you that perhaps if you think about who you are or who your audience is, if you want to get a sense of what do I need to do? I'm going from this meeting to another meeting. So really quickly, okay, what's my relationship with this person? All right, we're very much the same and we're both real talkers. So I know what's going to happen is we're going to get waylaid. My purpose of this is to specifically ask them to get that particular thing done, jot that down, make a quick plan. Think about what's important. Maybe you're having to lay someone off. You need to be thinking about your paralinguistics. Okay, this is a serious and a somewhat somber conversation. You have to change the tone of voice. You want to move more close into the camera. You don't want to move away like you're scared of the conversation. So maybe this checklist will just quickly help you say, am I ready for this conversation? Have I thought about the things that I know are important? How can I show this person that they matter to me? So another example, you've got people on your staff who are expressives, like me. You have people on your teams that are very analytical. When you say hello to them in the office or they say hello to you, you've probably figured out a way that with this person, you always have to ask about their weekend. And someone else just looks agitated if you make small talk. Well, take a moment before you jump into the next call and say, oh, right, John, he wants me to get to the point. Think about, oh, wait a minute. Didn't I hear so-and-so had a parent in a long-term facility and they're very expressive? Maybe I should ask. Now, you may think about those things and say, I only have 5 minutes. I can't build that connection. But at least if you've thought about it, in something you say or do, or even as you leave the conversation, you don't open it with, how's your grandma? But you close it with, John, I remember you said your grandma was in the hospital. I hope she's feeling better. Just know that I'm thinking about you and I'll look forward to touching next week. Those small, yes, deliberate, but quick thoughts, write them down, take the time. And the next conversation you have, what people hear, see, and feel is going to be more aligned with what it is that you hope your presence brings to their life and to their work. Questions?
Well, that's fantastic. That's just superb advice. I've learned a ton today, like I did last time. I think we're going to try to take a lesson from you here and actually give people 2 minutes before their 12 o'clock Zoom meeting. So we'll kind of move into wrap up mode. Sean, can you remind everyone what happens next? Recordings, follow up, etc., please.
Absolutely. So we've also been broadcasting to Western's YouTube channel. The recording will be there almost immediately. You can also follow up on the Western Alumni Relations website to find a follow-up article, as well as some of the slides that we shared today. We will make those available. I saw that a few times in the chat, so we'll make sure to get those to you.
Okay, Kanina, so on behalf of Western Alumni, on behalf of Ivy, on behalf of the audience, me, Sean, and everyone, you put in so much time and effort. You were gracious enough to give us your time for the second time as we're working through this. Thank you so much, and thanks for the preparation and great job today. For the audience that tuned in, we hope you got some value here, and we hope you'll see us again next time. Cheers. Take care, everyone.